All right, thank you. All right, well, good day, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our collective wayfinding series hosted by the Wallace Center's Food Systems Leadership Network. Today, we will hear from San Diego's Food Systems Alliance, who will be sharing about their journey to address racial inequities that have existed in their organizational structure and their efforts to create a more just organization. I am Melanie Edwards, and with the Wallace Center, and I help facilitate the Food Systems Leadership Network. The Food System Leadership Network is a national peer learning community of people and organizations across the country. And like all of you here today who are working towards a more just and equitable food and sustainable food system, the Wallace Center creates opportunities for leaders to learn from and with each other. And next slide, please. Thank you. And we do that through a variety of resources, connecting people to each other, like mentorship, peer-to-peer learning, leadership opportunities, as well as communities of practice, trainings and technical assistance, and so much more. Across all of that, we are centering and advancing racial equity at the core of all of our work. Today, we are joined by the Food Systems Leadership Network member organization, San Diego Food System Alliance, who is going to speak more on their journey of centering racial justice in their work and their organizational leadership. This conversation is supported by the Food Systems Leadership Network activation grants, which were envisioned to foster relationships between network members and encourage more cross-network learning and celebration. With that, I invite you all to welcome Rachel and Sonia and Ellie with the San Diego Food Systems Alliance. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to hearing more about the work you've all been doing.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If not, shoot me a message. I'm Rachel Opporto. I'm with the Alliance, and we're excited to share our story with you today. I'm gonna just kind of get us started with some housekeeping first, and then we'll do some introductions together. So just a couple housekeeping. We will have a break today, so make sure to really kind of get ourselves moving and grab some water. And so no worries about feeling like you're going to be sitting for 2 hours, but please feel free when you need to take a break, stretch, and take care of yourself today. If you do need any support, tech support, or have questions, as Melanie just shared, Wallace Center is here for us today, so you can reach out and message Melanie or Annalena in the chat. And then we will have Q&A space today as well. So please feel free to use the chat. We welcome questions, insights, other perspectives. So please feel free to utilize that space to connect with one another or with us. And so to get us started, we first want to acknowledge the land that the San Diego Food System Alliance works and resides on. I'm calling in from Kumeyaay land, and we really, want to offer our gratitude, to the original people and stewards of this land. But we also want to recognize that this acknowledgement does not replace action. As visitors, we really commit to building meaningful relationships with the original stewards of this land we reside on, and deepening our understanding of the history of colonization. San Diego County has the most reservations of any county in the US, I believe. And so we really have a deep commitment to building those relationships and really looking to ancestral wisdom and indigenous ways of life as solutions. I welcome you to share in the chat where you're calling in from as well. So just a little roadmap for the day. We'll do some introductions and culture share together after this slide. And then we're going to share a little bit about our story, who we are as an organization, and really our journey towards becoming a more just organization, and then where we're headed. We'll do a little break there to get some stretches in, and then we'll come back and do some Q&A with the Alliance team here. And I believe we have some of our committee members joining as well. And then you'll have space at the end in a group storytelling breakout sessions to share your story as well with one another. And then we'll all come back together and do a little reflection. All right. And so before we jump in to introductions and sharing space together, we really want to review our community agreements. This is something that was actually developed during this journey and is really important to uplifting in the spaces that we're holding. So I welcome you to read some of the community agreements you see here, and please share in the chat anything that is really important to you when sharing space with others and having dialogue. A few that I will call out today that are coming up for me: adopt both and is probably something I really think about often. Establish and use shared language. Everyone has the right to pass. Recognize structural issues. Ask questions and be curious. And be vulnerable. Just a few. And these were all developed and co-created with our Alliance Network and leadership. So it is ever changing, and as time goes on, we add to it. And you will see this again before the group dialogue, so we'll make sure to share. All right, so now let's get to the fun part. So one of the other practices that we've implemented over the last few years is to start every meeting, space, gathering with a culture share, an opportunity to get to know one another. It really deepens our relationship with each other, and also leads into conversations about identity and culture. And so we would love to open this space with one of my favorites. It's called a rice breaker. It's actually a question I can't take credit for. It was developed by Dr. Amber Spries, you can see at the bottom of the screen there. So the question is, how does your family prepare rice? And it is such a lovely question to open spaces. I wish I could hear all of your answers today, but there is probably too many people to go one by one. So instead, myself, Ellie, and Sona will introduce ourselves and share. And then we'll have everyone go into breakouts and pairs and share the culture share with another friend here. So as I mentioned, I'm Rachel Opporto. I'm the Community Organizing Director at the San Diego Food System Alliance. I use she, her pronouns. And my culture share answer, well, I'm half Mexican, half white, and my dad is from El Paso, Texas, my whole family. And something interesting about how my family prepares rice there is when making Spanish rice, they don't actually use tomato paste or sauce, they use ketchup. And I always thought it was a little funny, and I think it really speaks to their experience as a Mexican-American family. So that's how one of my families prepares rice. And I'll pass it over to Ellie and then Sona to introduce themselves and share their culture share.
Hi, I'm Ellie Brown, the co-executive director, San Diego Food System Alliance. Happy to be here today. My family, I grew up in Japan. My mother's Japanese and my father's Irish, so the Irish side don't make too much rice. My mother's way of making rice, we always have to use a Japanese rice cooker. My favorite is Neuro Fuzzy. It's the best. It's the best. I encourage everyone to buy it. And very easy, but we do have to wash the rice several times before we cook it. And my mother thinks I don't wash it enough. So that's always a point of contention in our family, but yeah, we love making our rice every day.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Sona Desai, Co-Executive Director at the San Diego Food System Alliance. This is also one of my favorite culture shares. It's always, it never ceases to amaze me how many different styles there are of preparing rice. I'm from India. First generation Indian American. So rice is a huge part of my life. Grew up eating rice for almost every day for most meals. We use basmati rice. Basmati rice is, and it's still one of my favorites. I still continue to use that. It's my preferred rice. And we also use a cooker often, like a rice cooker growing up. But the special addition with, rice in our family is usually to add like a dollop of ghee and fresh ghee, homemade ghee, and then also cumin seeds. So yes, rice with rice. I mean, I still like to eat it plain, but it's really good when you add a little bit of ghee and cumin seeds.
Thanks, Sona. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I learned a lot about how to prepare rice last time we used this. So we are going to welcome you to share in breakout. So give just a minute here for the Wallace team to split everyone into pairs. Just introduce yourself and share how your family prepares rice, or maybe doesn't prepare rice if it's not part of something you eat. And I'll mention with our breakouts today, if you ever feel like you need to leave, you need space, and you're not ready to share, please just come back to the main room and we'll be here for you. So take it away, Melanie here, Annalena.
Awesome. Annalena here. Yeah, we have breakout rooms ready to go. There are several groups of 3. And I think there's about 5 to 8 minutes for this section. Is that right, Rachel?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So I will get these rooms open. All right, welcome back from the breakout rooms, everyone. Hope that was fun. Feel free to drop any good tips you learned into the chat box. And we'll hand it back over to y'all over in San Diego.
Awesome. Thank you, Annalena. So hopefully you learned a lot about rice in those few minutes. And we will be sharing at the end of this, probably in the follow-up email, one of our toolkits that we want to share with everyone. And part of that is actually our list of culture shares that we keep a running list of. And so we'd love to share those with you and receive any that you like. So we're going to move into sharing our story a little bit more with you. And I'm actually going to pass it over to Ellie to get us started on who we are.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, I'm Ellie again, Co-Executive Director, which is sort of part of the story. The co part is part of the story in our signal to shift power internally and to share the work, to share the load. Our mission and the story I'm sharing now really is a result of many planning processes that we had that Sona's going to walk through. But the mission, our current mission, is to cultivate a healthy, sustainable, just food system in San Diego County. We consider ourselves a diverse and inclusive network and are really committed to that diversity and inclusion, which we'll share more about. The next slide talks about our vision, really as the centerpiece for the work that we're doing. San Diego County Food Vision 2030. That was created through a 2-year participatory process, centering communities that we're serving, moving forward, communities that are most marginalized by our dominant food system, And Sona will touch on this a little bit further. But Food Vision 2030 for us is our call to action and our political compass to work together and galvanize together with our diverse and inclusive network. And how the Alliance is really stewarding, and we consider ourselves stewards. We are not necessarily the center of the vision, although we play a huge role in it. Our intention for development of San Diego County Food Vision 2030, which is a participatory process, was to create shared ownership, and that has really manifested. So, you know, we consider ourselves the steward of San Diego County Food Vision 2030. And the way we're doing it is through our 5 operating strategy tactics. First is building a diverse and inclusive network that is organized around Food Vision 2030. Second is changing policies, particularly focused on local policy, and a community-led policy advocacy approach. This is also a very important shift in our Jedi work. And third is shifting culture, narrative shifts that are needed to ensure that San Diegans are really part of a sustainable, just food movement. And this is also a huge part of our Jedi work as well. And fourth is increasing capacity. This is a little bit more on the ground programming. We have a new program called the Local Food Economy Lab that's providing support for farm, fishery, and food businesses in their viability, and also centering equity and community ownership in their work as well. And fifth is nurture organizational health and viability. This is really where we walk the talk of equity internally within our organization, with the culture work, how we create equitable policies and procedures internally, which sort of manifests itself into our network as well, because we have the opportunity to encourage best practices, but really set that culture and the tone for how we want to work together in this work. So this is our 5 operating strategy tactics. And I know Sona will touch on this as well. And I also wanted to share a little bit about the history and the origin story, and spend a little bit time here, because I know many of you probably are part of a food policy council or an alliance or a group similar to ours, and origin stories of entities like us is an interesting one. And I want to first call upon one of our wise leaders of our network, Diane Moss, who sits on our Food Vision 2030 Stewardship Committee, to share a little bit about the history of the food movement in San Diego and the history of the Alliance from her perspective as someone that's been part of it. Diane? Diane, are you still there? Oh,
Yeah, we see her. There we go.
I keep hitting mute and it doesn't happen. Okay, there we go. Thanks for the opportunity to share. And from my perspective, I've been around a long time. I've seen different iterations till we finally got to this, the Food System Alliance, and then they hired Ellie and things just miraculously started to change. But this focus, what I can say is that the canvas or the folks at this table look much different now than what it was before. It's a dedicated process to making things different and providing a pathway or for shifting. It was one of the smoothest things I've ever been a part of. I'm a person of color sitting on this board, which was not necessarily lots of folks of color in the beginning, with examinations on where we wanted to go, really purposeful processes and commitment to change. I think we're in a wonderful position now to really impact in the areas where we'd like to do so. This whole Jedi piece, I sit on the committee here, and at first I thought, okay, this is a trending kind of thing, but this is an organization that reached deep to make changes. I don't think anyone was offended, but the flavor of this changed when you adopted or started working. We started working on this food visioning, just the dedication to hearing from folks who weren't at the table to shape the table such that the issue of inclusion having a more full experience, we've arrived. At this point, it's fine tuning tools. More people are asking questions and are at the table. This issue and the pandemic didn't, the pandemic was a horrible thing, but it brought light to some things. And it really showed the strength of the model that the Alliance is using to be inclusive and to look at issues that really make a difference here in San Diego and perhaps everywhere. So it's been a long journey, and I'm going to say more than a decade at this table. And so I feel very comfortable being here and continuing to be a part of this existence. Thank you, Ellie. I hope I hit on some points.
Thank you. Yeah, that was wonderful. And we very much appreciate Diane for being such a consistent food justice advocate in our region. And, I wanted to also share a little bit of my personal story, the history as well, just to kind of fill in the color a little bit. In 2011, there was definitely a long history of the food movement, which Diane has been part of in this region before 2011. And, but if we listen to the elders in Indigenous communities, we will probably unveil a much lengthier lineage of the food movement that has been going on since the colonization of this land. And these are kind of the stories that we're trying to uplift at the moment. And in 2011, the Alliance was formally launched just to share the origin story, similar to other food system alliances that were launched in California and a few other places. And I was hired into the group as a facilitator in 2015, Diane was talking about. And Sona, our co-ED, was hired at the end of 2018. So that's about like 4 years where I was basically the only staff person in the San Diego Food System Alliance. And, with really, because I often get approached by food policy groups about these issues, I wanted to share that with full transparency and really vulnerability here virtually, that these 4 years of the Alliance as a sole staff member before Sona joined was an exciting time for me because we accomplished a lot, because I think of my entrepreneurial drive, but the hardest time of my life, without question. And I was overworked. My family was neglected. I remember Diane saying, "You seem like a kind of person that's always busy." My family was neglected. I was constantly worrying about doing the work and raising money to keep my job. It just didn't give me any capacity to make the real shifts that are needed around equity to make a significant impact. And having Sona on my team at the end of 2018 through a miraculous situation where a foundation that she was working at was like, "Hey, we're going to transition out of this issue and we want to invest Sona in your organization." I was like, hallelujah. And it really gave me the courage that was needed to assess what was really going on and the transformations that are needed for our work at all different levels. Myself as an individual, our organization, our network, our leadership, and the system change that we are all after. And some of the truth, first it was recognizing that the reality that the core advocates in the space over the last several decades, the paid ones, the ones with salary that were convening from sustainability, equity, anti-hunger, local farming, these issues around the food system are of certain race and class. Predominantly white and of certain privilege level to be able to commit to this work. So Diane, being a woman of color, was very rare in these tables, right? And the more technical the work got, the less connected we became to the communities that we're trying to serve. The change was not transformational change. And the way we were operating was becoming very grass tops work and not grassroots work. And also deeply examining my own individual personal influences as well. I was a victim of the dominant culture of overwork, sense of urgency, trying to achieve the next win, the next funding opportunity. And of course, these are really the traits, when you dig down into it, these are the traits of white supremacy, capitalistic culture that I am personally influenced by, particularly as a white passing half Asian woman with a model minority complex. And of course, with my first set of jobs, that training, being in that corporate background, I was very results driven, ROI driven. So that was sort of my own learning journey as an individual trying to do this work, but also the shifts that we needed organizationally and the network and the leadership, and then really examining at all levels. So I'm excited to reintroduce our co-ED Sona to continue sharing this story, because she has been integral to us being able to take these courageous steps forward.
Thank you,
One
Ellie.
moment, Sona.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you so much for laying that foundation. So, building off of what Ellie and Diane, shared, we, like many organizations in the food system space, we really, we have a similar origin story, predominantly led by people with privilege or in positions of power. And we knew that if we wanted to truly live out our mission, which is to cultivate a healthy, sustainable, and just food system, that we needed to change the way that we approached our work, who we are, and what we're all striving for. So our journey really begins with, as Ellie said, we had the privilege of having a local foundation. So I worked for a local foundation that did seed my position at the Alliance. And one of the outcomes of that grant that they gave to the Alliance was for us to focus on diversity, inclusion work. And so that was really coming from, a funder that was funding us. But at the same time, we have had a leadership network of 40 organizations. Diane was one of them. That's the table where Diane mentioned there were not a lot of people that looked like her or were doing similar work to what she was doing or is doing. So that group, the 40-member Leadership Council, also at the same time was, and this was 2018, they were also looking at our mission and saying, okay, like we need to do more to center justice in our work. And so we started, I think we're a couple slides back on operating strategy. So really where we started was we wanted to look at our operating strategy and look at our mission, our vision, who we are. And so led by this 40-member group that comprised our leadership council, we started to have internal conversations about what does just mean in our mission? Are we actually living that out? How can we live that out better? What do we need to be prioritizing? And before that, we had I would say that we had a set of principles by which, or a charter. I think there was a charter by which the Leadership Council, used to guide their work, but we didn't really have a strategic plan or, a very intentional strategy for how we want to operate as an organization. So we knew that for us to really start on this journey, that we needed to look within first and really work on collectively developing a revised mission, vision, set of core values, and a theory of change that can really guide our work moving forward. So this was not, it was a year and a half. I think it was a year and a half process to really land on what we, can share with you all. It's part of our toolkit, but, a 2-pager that shares our core mission, vision, values, and our theory of change. So it really was a process to land there, but we had buy-in from the people that had been a part of this work. So that was one element of starting this journey. The second element was saying, okay, if we have an internal compass, we now need to develop a shared, community-rooted external compass, a compass that will guide us all as we do this work within our food system. And so this led to the process of developing San Diego County Food Vision 2030. which Ellie mentioned. This was a 2-year planning process that we started in the summer of 2019. So right after we had completed the operating strategy, we started on this. And it was a two-year planning process, which we were very explicit about how we wanted to go about creating this vision. We wanted to make sure that this was a vision that was seeded by community that is most impacted by inequities within our food system. And so we started to create a plan for how we would go about engaging community, how we would do this work. But we realized that we needed help. We needed help to figure out how we could successfully create a truly community-rooted process that would allow us to build out this common vision. And so that's where we brought in the Justice Collective. And the Justice Collective is amazing. We highly recommend them. We loved working with them. We brought in the Justice Collective also in the summer of 2019 with the support of a local foundation. It wasn't cheap. I think when, internally, I think when we were budgeting for this work, we had imagined that we would put, $10,000 to $15,000 or maybe $10,000 to $20,000 towards, some work that we could do to have a few workshops with our network around, developing shared language around justice, diversity, inclusion work, the journey of how to become a more anti-racist organization. And we thought 20,000 for an organization our size was what we could allocate. We started making calls. I remember calling a lot of different consultants. And what really stood out with the Justice Collective is they were the first ones that said to us, we don't do one-offs. We don't just come in and do one workshop with your network and then leave. We want a commitment. We see the success of our work is reflected in the success of the organizations that we work with. And so we're in it for the long haul. We have a minimum of at least a 6-month process. We have a series of steps. We want to be able to have interviews and conversations with people across your network, staff, board, and members of your leadership council. We want to understand what the baseline is and then take that information and fold that into developing a full day retreat or session and complement that with resources, educational resources that we could share with folks. And then also work with us to develop a plan for how we can seed this work long-term. So that was the scope of our work with the Justice Collective. The Justice Collective is a women-owned social impact consultancy firm that's based in Oakland. They do work with consultants and contract with consultants, I think, that are located across the country. So we brought them on. The scope was $50,000 originally, and it was supported by our local foundation, the California Endowment. And I'll share, I'm sharing a lot of detail, but I think that it might be helpful, as you all reflect on your journeys and your approach, or are inspired to in similar ways. So for us, what was really critical in getting the support from the California Endowment was because we were a network with several organizations that were part of this. So they really saw an opportunity for the collective impact, or the ripple effect of seeding this work and developing a lot of the sort of competency around this within not just our organization, but the impact it could have on all the organizations that are a part of the San Diego Food System Alliance. So that's really what allowed us to form our Jedi Committee, which is the next slide. And we first we were calling it our EDI, our EDI work, our equity, diversity, inclusion. I think in one of our Jedi Committee calls, we recognized that justice was a core value that we developed in our operating strategy, and that needed to be in there as well. And then, of course, we landed on Jedi and really sort of loved the way that resonated with all of us. So we developed this Jedi Committee, as I mentioned, with the support of the Justice Collective. And this committee was comprised, it was a mix of staff, Ellie, Rachel, and myself. And then we also had board member. And then we had four members of our network. So Diane Moss, Ariel Hamburger. Also want to shout out to Ariel. She's on the call with us as well. Ariel was also one of our founding Jedi Committee members. And then we had two other folks that were also from the network. And so over the past 3 years, the Alliance is really committed to this work. You know, we dedicated dedicated staff capacity to convene this Jedi Committee on a regular basis. And the role of the Jedi Committee is to really be able to hold ourselves accountable for this work in the organization. And they've been so essential. The committee has been so essential to us, to our journey and where we are now. And so, Rachel, I know I'll be passing it to you to share a little bit about what we've collectively been able to develop with the Jedi Committee and with our network.
Thank you, Sona, Ellie, Diane. I was hoping I could just listen to you all talk for the rest of this. It's so lovely. And thanks everyone for hanging in there with me with these rearranged slides. So yeah, I have so much to share about all these amazing things that have already been said, and so happy to pick up, you know, in this spot. Being part of this Jedi Committee that we've brought together has been transformative for the organization, but also for me personally. We have all agreed that we have this small group of folks that just enjoy each other so much, and those meetings and spaces bring so much joy and dialogue and trust and vulnerability. So it's been a pleasure being a part of that, and the work that we've produced out of that space is incredible. And one of the first things that we did with the support of the committee, as well as the Justice Collective, as well as our leadership council that was still meeting, was to develop this statement on justice. And, you know, as a group, we really made the decision and commitment that this work and this commitment to justice, you know, would be led with race. And that when we were to craft a vision for our food system, for achieving justice in our food system, it was really about achieving racial justice in our food system. And that this was the first thing we needed to do before we went down the path of, well, how do we restructure our network? How do we change our policies? How do we implement this? Was really come to that commitment together in agreement. And to be honest, it was messy. You know, it took a lot of hard conversations, a lot of dialogue with our existing leadership council, a lot of time with our Jedi Committee, editing words, talking about what interdependence means, talking about what these, you know, words really meant, and trying to really, you know, be deeply intentional about what we were going to put out. And so what we would love to share with you is one piece of that statement on justice that was developed that really shows, you know, the conditions that need to be met in order for us to truly achieve equity, racial justice, and food sovereignty. And so this is really towards the end of our full statement on justice, but I think is really important to share. So I'll just read the bolded, and then you can kind of glance at some of the other text. We'll also share this after so you can read the full thing. So we believe that equity, racial justice, and food sovereignty are achieved when all of the following are true. Everyone has dignified access to opportunities for health and well-being. Historical injustices are recognized and rectified. Resources and wealth are distributed equitably. And interdependence of people and their environment is realized. And this is our guiding, you know, our guiding light, our guiding space. We have to go back to this and read. And maybe grow it, maybe change it as we go along on the journey. And really happy to share this part with you, but we'll definitely share the full statement with you as well. And so one of the other really big pieces of this work, I think, as Ellie has mentioned, Sona, Diane, you could see through the work we did with the Justice Collective, that hosting spaces for our leadership to learn together, to get that necessary education on, these historical injustices, on racism, on the oppression that communities here in San Diego and across the country have faced, and to do that learning and unlearning. And so we hosted multiple workshops for our Alliance staff, board, our leadership council, which is that original founding group of the Alliance, and other leaders in our network to really learn and evolve along this journey with us. And those workshops, looked like a lot of different things. We had the full day retreat that Sona mentioned as a part of that scope with the Justice Collective. We also hosted workshops, focusing on developing a common language, understanding structural challenges, right? As I mentioned, those, structural racism and historical inequities. We hosted workshops on identity construction, as Ellie really shared in the beginning, working on ourselves. We had space around dialogue facilitation. How do we be, good facilitators that are holding space for others in a really, caring way, all the way to community-led movement building. So a lot of topics that I think we have covered in those spaces with a lot of really amazing consultants and facilitators. And this is that trickle effect, this is where we see this leader of 40 folks sometimes at a time sitting together and learning and unlearning, and then taking that back with them to their organizations, their large institutions here in San Diego County. And it's really wonderful to have done that with all of them together, creating some really wonderful relationships. And so where did we go from there? I'm getting to the roadmap that we've alluded to a few times. And so with the Justice Collective and with all of this work kind of moving along this journey, but also kind of happening at the same time, we developed a 3-year roadmap. And this is really that, technical document or work plan or guide, whatever you want to call it. We call it a roadmap that would help us to take tangible steps towards achieving this vision and really hold us accountable to that big statement we made. And so we did this in partnership with our Jedi Committee, of course, and with the support of the Justice Collective. And this roadmap was really aligned intentionally with our organizational operating strategy. And this is the piece that we really are excited to share in terms of how did we come to that, because it was a process to decide how are we going to start on this? How should it align? How is it going to be structured? And so getting to that decision that this roadmap should be directly aligned with those pillars of our organization, with the way that we operate, was, I think, a really important piece of the process. And for me, really transformed how I viewed the work going forward. And so we worked with the committee, staff capacity, more hours than I could probably count, probably over the better part of a year, to develop, objectives, goals, strategies for creating a more just organization. I'm going to share a little snapshot of what that looked like. We will definitely share this with you as well. It's a little blurry, but I want to just show you some of the components of where the roadmap, really came to. This is the, pretty PDF version. There is a very large Excel sheet version as well, that we're happy to share some of those tools with you. And so you can see at the top, hopefully some of these sound familiar from the beginning when Ellie was sharing our pillars, that we really aligned the goals of the roadmap with our strategic plan. So influence policy, nurture organization being goals of this Jedi roadmap. And then we went and developed really clear objectives that captured that vision that we had. What changes did we need to make, such as developing an inclusive network that we've talked about, and decision-making structure, building a more diverse and representative board. So these were kind of some of those clear objectives that we brainstormed and fine-tuned. And then I think pretty importantly, each of those has a set of actions or strategies that have deliverables and are time bound and have a goal set with them. So that's really what helped us to be able to achieve many of those strategies and actions we laid out, was having a really kind of deliverable item. And sometimes it was just a tracking document to track our staff and board makeup. And sometimes it was a summary of the research we did, but it was really important to hold us accountable to this process. And that's also where the Jedi Committee came in. We have quarterly meetings now where we would review. So what did we do this quarter? What did we accomplish? What have we changed? It changed and evolved over time. And that, is important to do, but we had a space to really have those conversations and to hold ourselves accountable to these actions. And some of the accomplishments we would love to share. And then after this slide, we'll be taking a little 5-minute break. So I'll just share, I guess I can share all of them. They're really wonderful. So one of the first things we did was create a Jedi Toolkit. So that's something we'll share with you after this webinar. It has all sorts of wonderful information, but mostly it has tools that we utilize to develop this roadmap. It has our statement on justice, and it has guides around creating equitable spaces, physically, virtually, and how we engage with the community in a community-led, equitable way. So we have some guides in there that are really just, a compilation of our best practices and resources that we utilized. We, of course, developed Food Vision 2030, engaging over 3,000 community members here in San Diego County. And what I'm most proud of is that a majority of those folks that we did engage and who developed the vision really were from communities of color or communities that have been disinvested in. We assembled a majority person of color POC Food Vision 2030 Stewardship Committee. So this is our current, leadership body or group that is stewarding the vision forward with us. And we also created a free membership program for the organization. So these are all parts of how we developed a more inclusive network structure. We implemented and are continuing to implement community-led policy advocacy, programming, and storytelling. We cultivated a diverse board of directors with at least 50% women of color, actually, a majority POC-led staff, and a growing POC-led network. So again, really critical to that organizational health. We invested in staff through livable wages, quality benefits, and opportunities for growth. We also established equitable policies and procedures for the organization. So that's the employee handbook, our compensation structure, hiring process. I think the list goes on because there's a lot of policies you have to have in place, but this is really looking internally at how we were operating. And last but certainly not least, we created and are continuing to cultivate a culture of care and wellness within the organization that really celebrates our diverse identities, cultures, and we continue to create space for shared learning and really foster reflection and healing in those spaces. We want to be an organization and a team that cares for each other and cares for our wellness, and avoids many of those experiences that Ellie described in the beginning. And so we have to work on that, together. And that was intentionally part of this roadmap. I'm going to pause here because we do have a couple minutes. If Sona, Ellie, I think I know Ariel had to hop off, but if you're still here, feel free to add. But love to just open it up for any thoughts that you want to share that have come up.
I think one thing that comes up for us is we approach this work with immense amount of humility. We're kind of learning as we go. So saving time for reflection is really important, and not here to say we are experts in this by what any means, just really sharing our journey and our learning throughout. And also happy to share any failures that we've experienced as well. And I see some questions on the chat as it relates to reluctance to being part of this journey with us, which we have definitely experienced. So yeah, we'll share more on the Q&A, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add there is that we're early in our journey, and I think we say that a lot internally. That there are so many people, organizations that have been doing this work much longer than we have. There are many organizations that are being seeded with this as the foundation. So we really recognize that we are really early in our process and our journey.
Thank you, Sona, Ellie. I'm sure I see lots of great questions, but I'm going to just share a couple more components of where we are now, and then we'll take a short break before we do some questions. And so where we are now, this is our commitment and some of the areas that we are moving forward. Continue to strengthen our foundation of equitable policies and procedures within the organization and network. Remain accountable to our roadmap. We are coming to the end of that 3-year roadmap and intend to finish implementing. To build a community-led movement around Food Vision 2030. This is the work to move forward. How do we make this vision become a reality? And it takes the community being part and being at the front of that movement. To continue to nurture that culture of care, wellness, and empathy, hold space for learning and unlearning, and reimagine hierarchies in our organization and move toward a more deeply democratic organization. I think this is something, Ellie, in our Q&A, you can share a little bit more about how we're doing that right now, actually. And then lastly, I think as Ellie and Sona were really speaking to, we're committed to this as a practice. We know that cultivating justice requires practice, patience, and deep commitment. The work is both a process and an outcome. And so we are committed to that practice and that process. And we're continuing to learn together and grow together. And there's still a lot of work ahead of us. And we're just, as Sona said, getting started on this journey and are committed to continuing. So let's take a 5-minute break here, and we'll be back right around 11:09, and we'll get started on the next section at 11:10.
Thank you. We'll see everyone back here very shortly for Q&A. So one of the first questions that we have right now for our Q&A session is from Lane, who would like to know how you dealt with folks who have been participating that were reluctant to move to action or resistant to change. And I think that's a question on everyone's mind.
Happy to take this. And then Ellie, Rachel, feel free to add or chime in. Such a good question. It's such a good question. I mean, I'll start off by saying we did have folks that were resistant. You know, that's always, I think that's always a little bit a part of this, this story. That said, it was the original desire to move toward creating a more just organization did come from that leadership network. So we had initial interest. I don't know if people really understood what that meant. You know, I don't know if they understood that it meant where we landed, which is we disbanded that 40-member leadership council and we created a group of a new leadership body that was comprised of people of color. So I don't know if people knew then, you know, that it was going to mean that they were no longer going to be the leaders, exclusive leaders of this organization. There would be different people that would be leading. I think on the journey, we definitely had a lot of one-on-one conversations. I know Ellie and I did a lot of one-on-ones with almost the entire 40-member group. And there were people that had, you know, had some pushback. They really liked I don't know if it's that they didn't want the bigger, you know, vision, but I think they really liked the exclusivity that came with the one-on-one attention that they had, where they could come to these meetings, they were for them. And so I think that was a challenge. It was a challenge for them to think like, oh, we're not going to be able to have that anymore. We won't be the ones that are, you know, deciding, you know, what the organization's going to do. And so the one-on-one conversations were key. We lost people along the way as well. And, you know, I think that some people disengaged. They maybe are starting to re-engage. Some are starting to re-engage. But I think there was definitely a period of disengagement from some folks on our leadership. And yeah, I think we're still going through, you know, the journey right now to really see, you know, how this will, you know, evolve. But I do think that for the most part, those were the exceptions. Most of our leadership council was very much on board with prioritizing this work and seeing where it was going to go. Ellie, I don't know if you would add anything else from your perspective.
The reluctance piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in general, I feel that as a society, we give too much space for people that have a lot of fear. I mean, reluctance, defensiveness, denial, the root of that kind of from a human emotional intelligence standpoint is fear. Fear in thinking that power can't be shared, that scarcity mindset, not coming from a place of abundance, and not trusting in change. So, you know, how can we as society don't dismiss it, face it with compassion, and that one-on-one is really important for that, but don't create too much space where that becomes a center of change, if that makes sense. I think I reread Emergent Strategy over the holidays, Adrienne Maree Brown. She mentioned something along the lines of change flows where energy goes. So can we center our work around our longing for what we want to see in the food system, around the shared values and that longing, and that gravitational force brings more and more people along. So now we see that we actually have a much larger network than what we started with because of that clarity that we offer around the vision, shared values, and what we have to offer, which is much more beneficial than a few folks that had that a lot of fear in them. And then, as Sona said, once they see it, the beauty of it, then they're kind of coming back and saying, well, maybe they have something to offer for me. So that journey is like a lifelong journey for most people. And they might not be ready for this now, but we know they're going to come back eventually. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thing, which is because I see some other questions that may maybe align with this, is that we didn't always do that alone, right? We had Ellie and Sona had a lot of one-on-one conversations. But as we mentioned before, we had support through the Justice Collective for parts of that journey. We had support through another consultant and facilitator, Roxanne Kamani, who's actually now on our board. And I vividly recall meeting with Roxanne to prepare for some of those conversations, for Roxanne to attend to help facilitate some of those conversations. And that was incredibly helpful and really acted as that support system for addressing that conflict and coming to resolution with some folks and some folks not coming to resolution, right? So that was incredibly helpful to have that support.
Yeah, at one point in the transition, our former sort of food policy council structure required a majority vote for any big changes. And we had a vote on our, I want to say, disbanding of our former leadership body. And one person that didn't want to come along with us voted no. He said he was going to vote no, and he voted no. With the rationale and reasoning behind it, but we didn't require a fully consensus vote at that time. We started with a consensus and sort of shifted into majority structure. So that was disappointing, but then we were like, he's not ready to come with us, but he will definitely at some point turn back around and join us.
Thank you. Just kind of similar question, which is like, how did you center the experiences of BIPOC affiliates who were already ready to go along with this while educating and transforming the white staff and council members?
Well, I would say one of our first workshops that we did with the Justice Collective, was a space where we had both. And so we weren't the ones that were really holding that space. We really relied on the support of the Justice Collective leaders that knew how to hold space for that. And that was a question that we had asked them also, that it was one of our fears, moving into this work was, do we have the skills, do we have the capacity to really be able to hold that space? And I think, we were reassured that the Justice Collective said, we do. This is what we do. This is how we approach the work. So I think that was really foundational. And then slowly over time, we've been building our capacity to be able to be that sort of facilitator, that moderator, that group that is able to hold space for both. We try to be mindful, though, that as Rachel said, our statement on justice is we are leading with race. So we have a very clear directive as well for ourselves. And so that, it always remains, we try to have that be our guiding light, have that be that this is the direction that we're going in, and we want to bring folks along. We believe in the space for the big tent. We believe in a space where everyone is able to be their true selves and bring that, and we'll do whatever we can to nurture that space. But there will be, times where there is a decision that has to get made, and in that moment, we choose to lead with race, and we choose to lead with the centering the experience of our communities that are most impacted by this work.
Thank you. We have another question from Avalon, who is wondering how you had to deal with situations that encountered harmful behaviors, and if so, how did you deal with them? And maybe also just to add to that, what was the role of the the organization that you're working with? Like, how did they help coach you into working around those?
I want to say one of the big things we did with the Justice Collective was coming up with like joint community agreements. I know it sounds foundational, but that, you know, just even like describing like what the different elements of those community agreements are, I think, you know, we as humans don't even recognize we're doing certain things. So that was key, I think, for me to kind of set that foundation. And of course, this is always kind of this ongoing process of, you know, allowing us to be better humans and really being accountable to those agreements, and holding a way to also have a shared accountability structure where, you know, we're really calling people in, is something we're still working on, I think. But, you know, I think we also, we talked about some of the reluctance. I think that was the most harmful behaviors when we are dealing with these huge changes through the process. So now, Rachel, anything else for you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember awkward moments where we had spaces where, you know, someone in the network would say something that felt like it was, you know, not at all aligned with the culture that we are trying to create. Maybe also say something that isn't, that doesn't necessarily have all the facts or all the, you know, context, you know, associated. And so we would, you know, I think, you know, it would be hard and it would be a little bit uncomfortable, but to have to, you know, try to facilitate those spaces. I think a lot of the ways in which we tried to deal with this was through the help of our consultants. And I think that's what Avalon was asking, was recognizing that we had dialogue facilitation training, you know, so we had support that would help us mediate those conversations, set those community agreements, also work on practicing this culture of care and wellness so that it's not, you know, it's not that somebody is intentionally harming, you know, another individual. It's how do we create a space where everyone can feel like they're being held. And so the follow-up question, I think, that Avalon was asking is who facilitated those. So these were different consultants that we used. The Jedi Committee, we never saw ourselves as the ones that have the expertise in holding that space. We were being sort of trained. There are many folks in our network that actually participated in a dialogue facilitation training. So we have members, I don't know, I think there were like 30 folks in our network that came to these dialogue facilitation trainings. So we were helping to create those people within our network too, so that everyone, you know, we all could really share that work of creating and holding space for everyone, whether it's, you know, harmful or whether it's, you know, encouraging and positive.
Thank you. We did get a question about the Wallace Center's role in helping in this journey. Annalena, did you want to speak to that? I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have played a big role in supporting. I know we've done several racial equity trainings for the network, but I'm not sure like direct partnership with y'all. Unless we have, and would love to hear that one.
No, but I would just say this,
so.
You know, this is huge, you know, this is really, you know, an opportunity, you know, for us to be able to, you know, share some of the challenges and some of the, you know, approaches that we've taken. And so we really see this. And the other thing I'll say is, as we've been working on becoming a more democratic organization that's looking at reimagining hierarchies, we had a conversation with the Wallace Center leadership, Susan and I'm drawing a blank right now, but the co-executive director model there, we spoke with Susan at length about that. Susan from the Wallace Center also shared with us some of the resources that they've developed for that arrangement. So yeah, I think we see the Wallace Center as really supporting our work, even if it's not directly, but we really value the relationship and the partnership and feel supported.
And I also want to add that, in the research, Rachel may have come across resources shared by the Wallace Center, but one of the resources for me that was helpful was the article that was written by the Wallace Center around kind of lessons learned around Wallace Center's Jedi journey. It kind of allowed us to be like, oh yeah, we should do some documentation along the way so that we are reflecting as an organization, which was sort of part of the reason why we're like, hey, there's this activation grant opportunity. Maybe we can share a journey at this point.
Thank you. All right, and then we have a question from Ken, who has been with, is familiar with your organization and the early work that you've done. And he's wondering of how you create space within political structures of the San Diego area and to allow this work to become more official policy.
I can take that one. So yeah, that's a great question. We, in a lot of ways, but I would say for me, what was maybe the main driver of really getting buy-in and support from our local electeds. San Diego County has, our county government, of course, and board of supervisors who hold a lot of power in the region. We also have the city of San Diego, which is equally as large and hold a lot of power in this region. And then we have all of the other cities and municipalities that have leadership. And so our vision and strategy when going into developing Food Vision 2030 was really, again, like Sona said, that big tent, we're all in it. And so funders and electeds are in the tent too. They can't be separate. We can't look at them as outside this circle, outside this network. And so we were really intentional about starting to build those relationships in a way where I think they understood that and understood our vision when developing Food Vision 2030 and were part of the process in like a really meaningful and engaged way. So rather than just having a meeting and like sharing a presentation of this is what we developed, we had a meeting and said, hey, we want to get you involved though. Can you share this with your constituents? Do you want to record a video or a message? How can we infuse you into this process the same way that we're infusing other community members, the same way we want funders to be a part of the process, the same way we want these past leaders to be part of the process so that you see it as yours as well, that there's an ownership over it. And so to me, that was the most successful part of getting that buy-in and starting those relationships and moving forward. And we were really lucky to have pretty wide support in development of this food vision, across the aisle, I guess, in some cases. And so, that has been, I think, one of the components that has now helped us in this phase as we start to, implement and move forward. You asked, Ken, what are some of the stress points you envision? Like building those relationships then through the food vision has really helped, I think, alleviate those stress points. A lot of the electeds we engaged are excited. A lot of the staff are really excited and I think are moving faster than we're moving in terms of implementing this vision and are ready to move forward. And we'll always face stress points with, new people coming in, new spaces. The political landscape has changed a lot in our area over the last few years. And so we'll continue to navigate that. And we are also very lucky to have a wonderful and amazing policy advocacy director, Consuelo Martinez, who I don't think is here today, to help strategize and understand how to move forward from a very personal experience in place because she actually works as a council member. And so we're really lucky to have that perspective. I don't know, Ellie or Sona, if you want to add anything else. This is a big question, but.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. That's a really, thank you for sharing all that. Hi, Ken. Nice to reconnect with you. Thank you for this really great question. I think what, everything Rachel said, the only other things I would add, is that the timing of developing Food Vision 2030 coincided with the pandemic. And so we also saw a lot of the challenges within our food system really front and center. And so we had political support naturally as a response to what the current environment, the current situation. Similarly, around centering justice in Food Vision 2030, we had 3 goals, and the first one was cultivate justice. And so having that buy-in also was part of the times, it was post George Floyd. It was part of where our county was also going. They declared in 2021, they declared racism as a public health crisis in San Diego County. We also were fortunate to have changeover in our county board of supervisors. So we went for the first time, for the first time in several years, we had majority progressives in our county board of supervisors. We had our first female woman of color county board of supervisors. So we had a lot of change in the leadership within the county board of supervisors. One of the stress points very specifically right now that we're feeling, and we will continue to feel, is that here we are in a situation where we have a very progressive board of supervisors, and they share a lot of the visions that our community shares. They're hearing from the community and they're mandating some changes, but the staff within these county agencies are still really old school and are still resistant. And so we're experiencing that now, where the county allocated 20 million to food systems in San Diego County, which is unheard of. And we're experiencing the challenges of county staff and, how they are maybe creating challenges to the process, and they're not really living up to the mandates that our progressive board of supervisors have given. So I think this is a stress point that we'll need to continue to work with and massage moving forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We did have a few more questions in chat, but we are going to be shifting towards breakout rooms. We have another dialogue that will be Rachel and team will be going over. So let's go ahead and transition. And if we have time later to answer those questions or even for follow-up, we can do that then. So back to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, let me share my screen here and we will move into some breakouts. So we have spent quite a long time today sharing our story, and we'd love to give you space to share your story, lessons, tools, things that are coming up for you, and really, I think start to just open up some dialogue about what are the challenges you're having and also what are you proud of. So here are the community agreements again. I'll give you, we'll just take a few seconds here to glance at them again before we move into dialogue. And I often prompt folks to identify one or two that they feel like they really need to hear today. Every day is different. All right. And so in the breakouts, small groups, we have a few prompts. You don't need to answer all of them. We would welcome you to just introduce yourself briefly and share some of your story around centering racial justice in your organization, your community. That could look like sharing what are the challenges you're experiencing, what are you proud of, and what are some of your lessons learned. As I mentioned before, if you are, don't feel comfortable sharing or feel like you need to leave the space, please come back to the main room with us. We'd be happy to have you there. So I will go ahead and I guess pass it back to you, Melanie and Annalena, to open the breakouts. I think we had planned for 20 minutes. And I think we can keep that. We'll keep the 20 minutes, and when we come back, we'll have 5 minutes just for a little reflection wrap up.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And just want to, if you could, a question came through the chat just to clarify on, I think one of the cultural agreement or one of the agreements there around the right to pass. Just before we get into that.
Yes, definitely. Oops, now I'm pressing the wrong direction. Yes, the right to pass. So absolutely, you have the right to pass on answering those questions. You have the right to pass on, being in dialogue or conversation if you're not in a place where you feel ready right now to have those conversations. Or if you just don't have an answer to the question, you always have the right to pass. We don't feel like there is any pressure to have to speak up at every time. Silence is okay.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And we'll be able to send those question prompts through to the rooms as well in the that function. And we have some rooms set up right now, so about 20-ish minutes. We'll get you all out there in some conversations and look forward to seeing you when you come back. Rachel, are you able easily to copy and paste those questions into the chat box and then I could just broadcast them out?
Yes, I sure can.
Cool. Thank you. Guys, that chat box, so many questions.
Take a little